Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. For the sake of time, I've had to trim this down a little bit to fit within the 15-minute bracket. So basically what I've cut out is Norcal Corner had made a comment suggesting that men's rights activists support the patriarchy, and I had replied in my comment stating that the National Organisation of Women is against shared parenting and therefore in favour of traditional gender roles where women are the ones who take care of children. So therefore they are in fact supporting the patriarchy, and we are fighting against those traditional gender roles and against what the feminist class is patriarchy.
What's the word I'm looking for? Competent, basically, to be in the condition to help put in that time and effort in raising the child. I think if he's able to, then yes. If that father has a criminal record or has a history of violence, I believe, then that becomes an issue, and especially if those issues, especially if those issues are recent or has a history of violence against a child or his own child.
I find it very telling that you specify fathers here as opposed to parents in general. Do you think it's okay if a mother has a violent history against the child? Is it okay for her to have custody then? Of course, if you are going to say no, she shouldn't have custody, then I have to once again ask, why specify fathers and not talk about parents in general?
Then I think that there needs to be some sort of things about that. And of course there are some fathers' rights activists that are like, no, they should have equal time, they should be given a second chance.
Well, I guess it really does come down to what the crime was and what the evidence for the crime is. Obviously an accusation should not be enough, otherwise parents will just fling accusations back and forth during a custody dispute. But regardless of that, my standpoint is a very simple one, that both mothers and fathers should be treated exactly equal when it comes to this. That's all.
And, I'm sorry, but I'm kind of more for the protection of the child and for, the sake of, and I'm sorry to even say this, but for the sake of the mother. So on the idea of the father's rights in custody, I think for the most part we have a pretty equal footing already.
You've got to be fucking joking, right? You can't honestly say that there is equality in the family court system. Just no fucking way. Unbelievable.
On that, and that's why I say that I believe that part of it is about maintaining the patriarchy, because it's about trying to maintain some level it's trying to maintain this level of control and trying to gain more out of it when there's really no necessity for it.
No. Wanting to be part of your children's lives and to be a father is not maintaining control. It's fucking being a parent. And, I would think that there is actually a necessity for it. I actually believe fathers are important. I mean, call me fucking crazy, right? But I actually think that fathers are important in the lives of their children. Or at least should be. That's what we might consider equality.
I think we've already made pretty great strides in trying to get to the equal footing, at least on this particular issue, than we have on a lot of other issues. Hardly supporting the patriarchy or traditional gender roles. On the other hand, feminist organizations like NOW are against shared parenting and support traditional gender roles where the male is the provider and the woman raises the children. your argument on now is not really a necessity to be throwing in there, because now I kind of consider, especially with what's her name, Terry O'Neill or something like that, whoever the woman is that's leading it, I consider to be a rad femme, and I think in general that now has become a radical feminist group. They've made great strides in protecting abortion rights and protecting women's rights, protecting LGBTQ rights, and a lot of great, little social liberal, social justice warrior BS. They've made great strides in certain forms of equality and identity politics. I will admit that. The idea, though, that they should be considered one of these champions for gender equality, I don't even see why the necessity to bring now into it.
Well, the reason I brought now into it is extremely simple. You claim that feminism is fighting against gender roles and the patriarchy, and that men's rights activists are in fact supporting gender roles, traditional gender roles, and the patriarchy. And I've given you a perfect example where the exact opposite is true. Now, a major feminist organisation, regardless of whether you like them or not, they are a major feminist organisation, supports traditional gender roles when it comes to parenting. They are effectively supporting the patriarchy as you guys would define it, while at the same time men's rights activists like myself are fighting against those traditional gender roles and what you guys would call the patriarchy. That is why I brought it up, because it's the perfect counter to your argument, which you presented no evidence for.
Because the National Organization of Women is, I consider to be kind of Anita Sarkeesian. I consider to be more Sarkeesian-like, and I don't know that enough about them to really take that much, to go too far off on it, but what I've understood so far about them is that they've made great strides in certain areas. When it comes to their actual ideas of feminism, I think are a bit radical, and I think are a bit I would at least say, at the very most, say they are a bit reactionary.
So I've noticed in Norkel Corner's video response, he tends to use the words reactionary and revolutionary quite often as arguments. Whenever he says reactionary, it's in a negative way, and revolutionary in a positive way. But at no point does he actually define what he means by these terms, nor does he ever give examples of how what he's talking about is reactionary or revolutionary, nor does he ever bother to explain why reactionary is somehow negative and revolutionary is somehow positive. I mean, I would think that Marxism in itself is reactionary, isn't it, to capitalism? Interesting. But it's almost like he's using these words, these buzzwords, instead of actually presenting an argument.
In fact, I would say that the National Organization of Women, much like the, what's it called, basically the equivalent to the men's version, the National Men's Organization or whatever it is. I think that they're both kind of reactionary groups. I think that they really serve no other purpose but basically kind of trying to they go that social justice warrior type, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. I don't know. I don't really have enough to go on this particular group to say much, but they're against shared parenting and support. I can't really say whether or not they are or they aren't.
Yeah, that's probably because you haven't bothered doing any research before forming your opinion.
But again, I don't really consider now to be a good argument I don't even think it can be argued in favor or against your argument, because again, the National Organization of Women, they're reactionary. They're not a group I would really consider to be a great. They're not a group I would consider a great argument in favor of feminism, and I wouldn't say that they're a great argument in favor of any sort of thing like that, because they are kind of I don't know. The woman that leads it just strikes me as too Sarkeesian-like and too cuckoo for my taste, as far as gender equality goes. Hard on supporting the patriarchy or traditional gender roles. The problem is that there's certain men's rights groups that do, unfortunately, support traditional gender roles, and they typically do support some form of a patriarchy.
No examples of which you give in your 2-hour reply. Not one. Not a single men's rights group mentioned, or an example of how they support the patriarchy. Not a single one.
And the problem is that most men's rights movement groups are also very libertarian, very anarcho-capitalist. The closest to leftist they get is probably very social justice warrior, like bourgeois liberal type. But I don't really consider any of them to be revolutionary, or any sort of form of trying to achieve gender equality. Again, they don't really support the idea of tearing down the class system and bringing about some form of actual gender equality through the revolutionary basis. In fact, many of them still support the class-based system. A lot of the different things it would take me a bit to explain, and I just personally don't. I believe that in some cases, a lot of them can even be very conservative, and and some of them even very pro-life at that, because some of them claim that women should not have a right, that men should have a say-so, and that men should have a right in whether or not the baby is, whether women keep the baby or not. And I believe that men should have a say in it. I don't believe that it's the man's decision. I believe that it's the woman's body. I believe that it's, that it is a cluster of cells that cannot survive until up to a certain point. And that's why I personally believe the final decision rests in the woman's hands. The say-so, the discussion can go, it should be on an equal footing, but the final decision is the woman's, because it is her body, not the man's. Therefore, it should be her decision. It should be her final decision. Weigh as on an equal footing, weigh the pros and cons. But as far as the actual decision, women